Mr. Kunda was a man of wealth, a man who had everything he could ever want. He lived in a large house with his daughter, Malaika. They never lacked for anything. Their home was filled with warmth, and love flowed in abundance. Malaika was everything to her father. Her mother had passed away when Malaika was 12, and since then, her father had raised her alone. He worked hard every day, providing for her, and showering her with affection. As she grew, Malaika became a young woman full of life, faith, and kindness. She was loved by the people around her for her gentle heart and her strong belief in prayer. Every day, without fail, she woke before the sun, knelt by her bed and whispered her prayers of thanks. She believed with all her heart that God was watching over her. Her mother had taught her that prayer was powerful, and she had carried this lesson with her all her life. But one day, everything changed when her father fell sick. It began with a simple cough. Her father's voice grew weak, his strength began to fade. Days turned to weeks, and still the illness held him captive. No doctor could help. Malaika prayed desperately, fasting for days, hoping her faith could move mountains. But the illness only worsened. She was weak, tired, but she did not stop. She believed that if she prayed hard enough begging God to save his dad, if she proved her faith, God would listen. But then, her father died. The pain of losing him was too much for Malaika to bear. She had pleaded, she had cried, she had sacrificed, and still, God had taken him away. She was devastated. She felt as if the very foundation of her faith had been shaken. Anger and confusion filled her heart. God, you do not love me, she screamed into the silent night. If you loved me, you would have saved him. Why would you take him from me? You are not real. What is the point of praying if you won't even listen? From that moment, everything changed. Malaika stopped praying. She shut her heart off from everything she once believed. She turned her back on God. If God could allow such pain, then he was no longer her God. Her life spiraled out of control. She no longer cared for the values she once held dear. She wandered through the streets late at night, seeking comfort in all the wrong places. She surrounded herself with people who didn't care about her well-being. She did things she had never imagined herself doing. She tried to bury the pain, but no matter how hard she tried, it clung to her like a shadow she couldn't escape. But then, one day, something unexpected happened. As Malaika walked through the busy marketplace, a man stopped her. He was tall, with deep eyes that seemed to pierce through her very soul. There was something unsettling, yet calming about him. "Malaika," he said, his voice low but firm. She frowned. "How do you know my name?" The man's eyes locked with hers, unwavering. "That doesn't matter. What matters is this. God loves you." Malaika laughed bitterly. "You must be joking. If God loved me, why did he cause me so much pain? Why did he let me suffer?" The man nodded slowly. "You just lost your father, I know. You need to understand something, Malaika. You need to go back to who you were before, the woman who trusted God, the woman who believed in him." Malaika shook her head. "What are you talking about? I lost everything. I lost my mother, my sister, and now my father. If God really loved me, he wouldn't have let this happen." The man's face softened. "What you don't know is this. Your father was not the man you thought he was. He practiced dark things. He had made dangerous promises to gain wealth, promises that required sacrifices. And your father gave up someone dear to him each time, first your sister, then your mother, and finally it was meant to be you." Malaika's heart froze. "What are you saying?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You see," the man continued, "your father used dark powers to grow rich, and to keep that wealth, he had to make sacrifices. He made deals with forces you cannot stand. Your mother tried to warn you about him, didn't she? She knew what was going on, and she tried to protect you." Malaika's mind raced, trying to make sense of what the man was saying. Suddenly the words her mother had spoken years ago echoed in her mind. "There are things in this house that are not right, Malaika. Never go into the room, the one her father had always forbidden her to enter. Malaika's legs went weak. Her world spun. The man's words felt like a hammer, breaking the image of the loving father she had once known. All this time, she had been mourning a man who had made deals with darkness. Her father had planned to sacrifice her too. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sank to the ground. "No, it can't be true," she whispered. It was as if she were in a vision, speaking to God himself, because the man knew everything about her. But it was true, and God had known. God had seen it all, and he had protected her, even when she didn't understand. Her father's death had not been a punishment. It had been a protection. The man placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Malaika, God has always loved you, and he knows you by your name. You didn't understand why things happened the way they did, but now you do. You need to go back to him. Go back to your faith. He never abandoned you." With that, the man vanished into the crowd, leaving Malaika alone with the weight of the truth as the conversation with the man playing in her mind. She sobbed uncontrollably, feeling ashamed, feeling guilty. She had turned her back on God when he had never turned his back on her. Malaika stayed on the ground crying until she had no more tears left. The pain of losing her father still hurt, but it was now replaced with a new understanding. God had not abandoned her. He had been protecting her all along. With a new strength in her heart, Malaika rose to her feet. She knew what she had to do. She ran to the one place she had once known peace, the church. That day, Malaika found herself on her knees again, but this time her prayers were different. She cried out to God, asking for forgiveness, asking for peace. She realized that sometimes, when God doesn't answer our prayers in the way we want, it's because he knows things we don't. He sees dangers ahead, and he protects us, even when we can't understand why. Malaika's heart began to heal as she surrendered to God's will. She returned home, and with the help of spiritual leaders, she and the others prayed to break the chains that had bound her family for so long. She finally entered the forbidden room. What she saw inside made her heart sink. The dark symbols on the walls, the strange objects scattered across the floor, and the altar stained with old blood. Her father's secret had been hidden in plain sight. But now Malaika saw the truth. She knelt in that very room and prayed for peace. As she prayed, she felt a calmness wash over her, a peace she had never known before. Malaika's life changed that day. She sold the large house and moved to a smaller one, a simpler life, built on faith and trust in God. She shared her story with others, warning them of the dangers they might not see, reminding them that sometimes, when God says no, it is because he is saving us from something far worse. Malaika's journey had been painful, but it led her to a truth greater than any she had ever known. God's love never fails, even when we don't understand it. And that, dear friend, is the end of Malaika's story. If you found her journey inspiring, please leave a comment, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories that can touch hearts and change lives. See you next time.